Good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing? I saw one thumbs up.
We're doing good. We're good.
Everyone's there. You go. Hello, my name is Robert Jacoby, president of ARC Technology Group. Today I'll be talking about mostly Twitter Bootstrap and a little bit of how it's integrated now into Joomla 3.0, which was just released about 6 weeks ago. There's a lot of talk about it at the Joomla World Conference about a week and a half ago, and it's the new way of Joomla, and it's making life a lot easier for managing front-end visualization. You can find us at our, whoops, that's really down there, on our website, our Twitter handle, ArcTG, or myself at Robert Jacoby. So just a little bit about ARC. Probably half of you already know it since I've seen most of you guys before. ARC is a 12-year-old web development firm specializing in Joomla and content management. We also do a significant amount of custom application development, and we're doing that now on the Joomla API as well. As I mentioned, 12 years of content management experience. We started out in 2000, so we're looking towards our 13th year coming up, and we just moved into the city from Evanston about 5 months ago. So it's nice to be down here and convenient to everyone. We have a number of expert custom developers. We're always looking for more, so please let me know if you are looking for some kind of work, projects, things like that. We're growing and very busy these days. Our client base is Fortune 50 entrepreneurs. Clients include Microsoft at the real high end. We provide the Joomla package for Microsoft Web Application Gallery, as well as down to smaller entrepreneurial firms. And we love Joomla. We've been doing it since before Joomla was born as Mambo, and all of our work is focused on Joomla CMS or now the Joomla Platform API. We want to talk about Bootstrap today because we have a vision about how content needs to be displayed and presented to the world. So content now is obviously on tablets, on phones, and we've been using Twitter Bootstrap prior to Joomla 3.0, bolting it on to Joomla 2.5 sites as well. And ARC and Joomla, we've had a long run with contributing and participating with the community. Joomla Day Chicago, J and Beyond, which is the developer conference out in Europe. We're a 5-year plus sponsor of Joomla Chicago. How many years has it been, Linda? How many more years will it be? CMS Expo, Joomla Camp New York. We work with the core team on projects, and we're a member of the Future Roadmap. So today's Joomla and Bootstrap. You know, the first big question is, what is Bootstrap? So we'll dive into what it is overall, a lot of the nitty-gritty and details of what it is. It's a very, it's technical, but it's not super difficult to learn to use. You're not coding a lot of PHP. It's being able to use a framework that makes design and implementation of design very easy. How many people here are mostly on the developer side versus design side? So we'll go developers first. Designers? Nice. So it makes life a lot easier for taking design, creating new designs, getting stuff right out of the box ready to go. We'll talk about using Bootstrap in Joomla. We'll just go through the proto template that's included in Joomla 3.0 and just walk through a couple of just sites to see how it works. You know, we'll look at the Joomla 3.0 site, see how Bootstrap works on the back end and the front end. So what is Bootstrap? According to their wonderful site, it's a sleek, intuitive, and powerful front-end framework for faster and easier web development. It is a JavaScript and CSS framework that allows a lot of components to be created sort of effortlessly, a lot of infrastructure for classes that do a lot of things. So for everything from buttons to forms to components that handle slide shows, transitions, accordion effects, things like that. It's got a bunch of pieces that are now wonderfully included in Joomla 3.0. So those would include parts of a grid system. There's basic CSS, UI elements, components. jQuery is now a core JavaScript library in Joomla 3.0, as well as MooTools is still there if you really like it and want to use it. sort of the file structure and look of Twitter Bootstrap. You have your Bootstrap root directory. There's Bootstrap CSS, minified CSS. So the minified version is sort of a compiled version of the CSS, so it's not as bulky. JavaScript, Bootstrap JavaScript, and the minified version of JavaScript as well. And some image directories for glyph icons, which is an open source free library of icons that are utilized all over the web, and they're used in multiple types of applications. A lot of your iPhone, Android applications use glyph icons as well. And that's included with Twitter Bootstrap. Let's talk about the grid system in Twitter Bootstrap. So Twitter wants to, Bootstrap wants to break out content into 12 columns of data. And that data can be fixed or fluid, and it can be utilized in a responsive way as well. And we'll get into that a little bit later. You see, at the top level, there's 12 single columns, and you can call them one column at a time, span multiple columns, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, or however many you want within the system. The fixed width of the container in fixed mode is 940 pixels, and in responsive mode it supports resolutions from 480 down for sort of the strictly a phone effect, 768 and below for tablets and phones, 760 up through 980, sort of the tablets, smaller browsers, and you can go 1200 pixels and up to support very widescreen formats. So you can have a single design. The columns will take advantage of all those widths. The columns can be offsetting or nested. So if you have 12 columns, you can put something in column 1, offset it the second column so that it's going only 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You can nest them so you have one giant column at the top, one giant container, and nest another 12 columns underneath, another 12 columns underneath. And you can do that on a fixed pixel resolution or as well as fluid widths. Twitter Bootstrap provides us with a base CSS. So one of the nice things is there's a bunch of topography that's already included and obviously can be overwritten. So just simple things like H1s through H6s are already set up and formatted in a nice way. So it's nice according to Twitter Bootstrap and how they like to do things. There's also a bunch of base CSS for emphasis classes. These are all classes, so you would just call them within your code. If you wanted a muted text, text warnings, text errors, text info, text success, all of these classes already exist and can be overwritten with whatever styles you want to use. But they're in there by default. So you have this framework for supporting output messages, any kind of content right in your application. We look at another set of functionality. We have a bunch of button classes here. Again, you just create a span with a class of a certain button type. And at that point, you can choose anything from primary, any of the default types of buttons. And they also automatically support hover effects. So all this UI functionality is built into the system. So once you've created it, you can utilize it however you need. And the JavaScript and CSS takes advantage of displaying it for you. Here's our glyph icons. You've probably seen these icons all over the web. They're utilized by tons of sites, tons of applications. These are all included with Twitter Bootstrap. So again, this is just another class that you would use if you want to create an icon download button somewhere. You could use that class for icon download or icon file or cog time, whatever you want, and all that exists already in the system. And there's also JavaScript. So by JavaScript, you can override or take advantage of a lot of the classes and functionality via JavaScript and jQuery. So if you want to use their modal components, accordion effects, transition effects, you can call that with regular JavaScript. For example, here's a button bit of code that's just adding a class, with a regular toggle, as well as an example of using the modal window where you're initializing the modal window and then showing it via JavaScript. So you can just have that call from a button call or anything like that. Any questions so far?
What does button
Don't touch it. It's very big and very red.
It's actually an interesting thing because what that selector's doing is grabbing all
All the classes that are
have both.
correct.
Which is kind of a little known CSS trick.
So the question is, how many buttons and dangers are there? Anything else? And all of this is available at twitter.github.com/bootstrap. So Twitter has created this environment, or provided the source code and all the code. It's easily downloadable. It's actually also, you can customize the download package. If you're not going to use certain types of components, extensions, effects, you can take that out to even have a smaller download of the whole package. That's as if you're doing it separately. The Joomla version includes the full Bootstrap. Whoa, yes, Dennis?
So how do you maybe we'll get into it, but how do you customize which buttons you want to use, which colors you want to use, look and feel?
You would override that in the CSS, so you already know the classes that are included. And if you go to the site, we could go through a ton of documentation. The best way to learn it is really to go to the Bootstrap website and look at all the examples and source code. I've just shown you a few examples of buttons and typography and components. There's a ton of stuff, and the examples are actually very, very good for learning how to use it and how to override it.
How large is the framework?
I think the one included in Joomla is about 86K. Yeah, it's a very tight framework. It's not fat at all, and it's well worth including. I mean, if you already have jQuery running on there, you might as well take advantage of it. jQuery is going to be a bigger hog at the end of the day than Twitter Bootstrap.
Are you going to get into where you make your changes in a CSS file?
No.
Or another file?
Always make it another file. Don't ever add a core.
No. Is there? You have to use less? Is my question.
You do not have to use less. You can override the CSS.
Maybe put a word of what less is.
Well, actually, it's a slide. Jumping the gun. Yes.
Do I have to go up to 3.0 to use this? Right now we're at 2.5. Do I have to go up to 3.0?
You do not. It's included in 3.0, which makes life a lot easier. You can certainly include it in custom templates that you're going to develop out, and just include it in that template directory. So you can include, so you have template name / JS or / bootstrap, and include the whole bootstrap structure. In that case, you could just create your custom sized bootstrap.
Is it with the core files, or is it included with the template files?
Included with the core files. Yeah.
In Joomla 3.0, it's
So they're kind of in the media, like in the media directory?
it's in the there's a UX. Yeah, it's in the library /UX or /UI. I can't remember now the exact. Thank you. So it's library /UI, and that includes all of Bootstrap. But with regards to 2.5, you can just bolt it onto whatever template you're using.
Somebody actually ported back either a plugin or something that actually will do it for you. So actually somebody built a 2.5 plugin that will actually, you can install it and it will actually include all the Bootstrap.
Oh.
Sell a plugin.
I was gonna.
One line.
One line, yeah, but
I guess it download the files for you too, right?
yeah, I think it dumps all the files and puts everything in.
Yeah, but then you're running
Is
a.
CDN?
I'm sorry?
Is Bootstrap available on the CDN?
No.
That's a shame.
And you probably wouldn't want to do that on a core on the Joomla 3.0 core application, because that you want to have a stable to Joomla versus. What was that about jQuery?
You can load jQuery from Google Loader
Plus it's
Correct.
like
to offset
there.
some
So-
of the bandwidth.
Yes.
Can you use like Joomla templates with this, or do you have to just use this Bootstrap system and then wait for templates to come out?
If you're going to go onto 3.0 templates, I would wait for the third-party template providers to make sure their templates are utilizing Bootstrap.
Thank you.
Can
Yes.
we touch on third-party extensions and responsive design and that sort of stuff?
With third-party extensions, it's all a Russian roulette always. But as they start incorporating 3.0, as they start developing specifically for 3.0,
Probably start adopting responsive design or responsive standards for like images, sizing.
well, again, if you're using the Bootstrap library, if you're using the core library, that's the goal, is to utilize it as a third-party developer as well, to use the.
Right, if that third-party developer.
Correct. If they're utilizing their own frameworks, that's just going to cause.
Do you have experience with like the adoption, or what's the pickup rate?
Joomla 3.0 is just out. It's the actual downloads are immense of it. Everyone's very, very excited. I think I just saw a stat. Actually, Jerome just sent me a stat. 36 million. Yeah. So Joomla 3.0 is being adopted very quickly as well. Yes.
I just wanted to address that. There's kind of a big schism with third-party developers right now adopting this. So you're going to see some people that are saying, absolutely, I'm on board, and if you go onto the Google groups, you will see a whole lot of people who are very angry about this.
There's already at least between 6 and 12 that I know of that are already building their applications on Bootstrap. So they did it before 3.0 came out. They had already headed that direction. And so there's some of them that have actually already are either converting now or have already started utilizing Bootstrap and making things more responsive.
I think community builders now.
Sobi,
yes, he's starting to convert it. Yes.
it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
You know, if you're switching over your whole UI framework, you're pretty much rebuilding, 90% of the app from scratch. Yes. Oh,
Has the schedule changed at all for 3.5, or are they still on?
3.5 schedule. What
Yes.
did I say at the conference? It's going to be in.
It changed.
Okay.
There is.
Did they move it up or back?
Oh,
they
back.
actually added a version.
What?
There is 3.0, there is 3.0, 3.1, 3.2, and 3.5. And as far as I know right now, it's going to continue that method because that gives us 2 to 2.5 years of support instead of 18 months.
So when is 3.5 coming?
3.5 is coming out.
I thought it was still like
March
June.
of 2014.
Oh, 3.5 is going to be in March of
March
2014.
of 2014, I believe.
Is 3.5 still considered the long-term support?
Yes.
Correct.
And everything before that
Is short term.
beta? Let's
Yeah,
face
more or
it.
less, yes.
Let's go to 6 months.
Well, the 3.2 will be less of a beta than this, but yes.
Oh, yeah.
I believe
Let's hope so.
the extra version that's been added in, that version, everything that's added after that version is forward-looking.
Correct.
Everything prior to that version is backward-looking.
Legacy support.
Yeah.
So 3.5 is still going to be the most stable is what, if you're going to convert to anything, if you're using brand core, you could go from 2.5 to 3.0 right now.
Correct.
But your extensions, most of them are waiting for 3.2 or 3.5 to come out before they really start modifying their stuff. They're working on it now, but they'll wait until that's stable in order to get the most bang for the buck.
So I didn't realize it was all the way up pushed to March. Initially, it was going to be June or July of this year. Yes, Dennis.
So, talk a little bit about the temp, I guess, the HTML that's generated, and how if you had a 2.5 system and you wanted to use Bootstrap, are there template overrides that are published that are available?
So yeah, we'll go into the template. So, and this is what I like to just do for the intermission. Back up, back up,
Why is that?
back up. Always back up. It's that reminder people need. So.
Can you back up?
People forget. People start playing with Joomla 3.0. They start adding their whole site on. Back up, back up, back up. Okay, using Bootstrap in Joomla. So, as you mentioned, it's native to the core, so it's right there. You would call it just as any other library function. If we're going to add the framework to our template page, that's sort of the one line of code that you need to get the framework attached to the template so you can start utilizing it right out of the box. No series of CSS includes, JavaScript includes. When we've done it in 2.5, we'll have 10, 20 lines of specific CSS and JavaScript includes. That calls up the built-in Bootstrap framework for Joomla 3.0.
Does that add the jQuery as well?
Yes.
Because Bootstrap's relying on it.
Exactly. So yes, that includes the jQuery as well. So it does a lot of heavy lifting very, very quickly. You never have to worry about it. Once we get into the template, the one first thing, the what?
Can't bottom load it.
I see. You create the container. This is a pretty simple top line snippet of code for beginning your div container. So we have class container. We see the PHP, which is getting the parameters from the template, whether it's a fluid or a fixed template. And there you go. That's sort of the first line of creating that box of your template.
Are those values boot container specific to Bootstrap then?
Yes. So either the,
Well, those parameters are specific to a template.
if this params, yes, these are specific to a template, but that template is then pushing whether it's going to use the fluid or the fixed Bootstrap.
Because
An example of a sidebar that would sit inside that container. Again, we'll just create, a div for a sidebar. Here we use the class span3, which actually tells it how many columns it will span within the container. So again, we have 12 columns to work with. They'll grow and shrink based on browser size. If it's set to responsive, it'll also stack them. And this is how we would just simply drop in a module into a sidebar section of the template. So if we wanted it to take up all 12 spaces, we just say span 12, or leave it blank. Span 1 if you just want one sort of column of content. And again, you can nest all these. Again, sort of the same. Grid system's the same. Example on the back end. The article manager, for example, has the left column is a span 2, and then the rest of the article is a span 10. The nice thing about Joomla 3.0, including Bootstrap, is that the entire backend as well is responsive as well with Joomla. So you can actually go into it with a tablet or mobile phone, and it's maybe not the greatest editing environment, but it's a lot better than Joomla 2.5. And I know Dennis was dying to hear about Less. We're just going to briefly mention it. Less extends CSS. Less is a framework compiler, a bunch of voodoo that allows you to add in logic to your CSS code. And it's included with, as part of Bootstrap, and takes advantage of a lot of technical CSS things you can do. I'm not a Less expert, so if anyone wants to jump in on that, they're more than welcome to.
Don't you run it in the course of creating a template and then it compiles the thing, or maybe, I don't...
Not exactly. So what Less is it's a series of instructions of how you're going to build your CSS, right? Since CSS doesn't have variables, I can't say the variable green equals this hexadecimal code, right? So you write all that stuff in Less, and then it compiles a big CSS file for you that says, every standard anchor is green, and when it's rolled over, it's red.
And this is integrated in with Bootstrap and all of the existing selectors.
So in Joomla 3, you can actually edit the Less file, and if you go into the command line, you can recompile the default
on the server
Bootstrap
Correct.
that came with Joomla 3 if you wanted to. You could also just open up the CSS file and change
And just manage the CSS, yeah, exactly. But if you're doing very large CSS, it makes life easier if you're trying to stay consistent across a lot of classes and things like that.
And you don't know how to do find and replace.
Well, you could do, yeah. So the smart aleck to the left mentions you could also do find and replace, which is great if you just always do it perfectly.
I have found the biggest benefit of this is that it fills in all the holes where your designer has not specifically made a choice, right? So if they haven't specifically told you buttons should look like this, there's a default button style that's already defined there that you don't have to worry about.
And then it can override.
Yeah.
So that's what Less is. I don't have any direct experience with it, but obviously some people do here, and some of our team does as well. Examples. So our fun example is actually, let's just look at Joomla 3.0. This is pretty much a vanilla install of Joomla 3.0, and it's the template name Proto something. I always Protostar. Thank you. So it's the default template Protostar, some content, and we can nicely test whether responsive design, Bootstrap design is working. And it's automagical.
Yeah.
But it really makes life easy. And if you start thinking of your bits of content being pushed around, you'll also start rethinking of how you actually develop all your content and your visual look. Whoops, I just lost my. There we go.
No, the font sizes stay the same.
You can actually, you can override font sizes.
Defined by M's, right? You get the, but I never liked that footer responsive.
The M's.
You know, you define it by M.
Well, what does Bootstrap have a static size for font?
It seems to. It,
No, it actually
Well,
should.
because as you were going across, it wasn't shrinking.
There is a static size. If you go on the Bootstrap page there.
Yep. So now we got this open as well.
If you just go to the Customize tab at the top of that.
And this is the customized link we were talking about earlier. Here you can choose whatever components and things you want to include.
All the way down. So you could set the default size of everything. 14 base font size, base font for headlines, base font.
So yeah, this is where you would customize the whole package, and you can.
So can you put a percent in there or an M?
You know, you
Yeah, you could.
Okay.
can put, and then you would oops, compile it down here, customize and download, and then you'd have your custom package. Now again, you're not going to be able to do this with Joomla 3.0 because the package has already been created and there's a default package that includes everything in Joomla 3.0. But if you're using, doing extra custom work, you can take advantage of it that way.
You said you can't do it in 3.0?
No, you can't have a custom package in 3.0 because it's already included. So they have the full Bootstrap package in 3.0.
If you want to include the core, if you do it yourself, you still could.
But then you're editing the core,
Yeah, exactly.
which you don't want
Part of the core, yeah.
which you don't want to.
Or you compile it and you use it just for your template.
Yeah, you just need to
Correct.
not including Bootstrap with a template, then you can use your own.
Well,
template.
either.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can get Bootstrap for templates for Joomla 5.
Yeah, there's some already exist. Correct, Justin?
You know, I was going to ask about like kind of a design question, and this may go into like the technology, but it's also kind of how you manage these things. There's a lot of the design work that I've done uses transparent PNG files, sort of layered, one on top of each other, maybe a page background, and then there's sort of like a container background, containing the content, and then things layered on top of that, Chrome for modules. And a lot of those graphics are background images for div tags or whatever. Now, can those scale as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, the background images will scale.
Automatically?
I don't remember if it's.
Query. I think there's a jQuery plugin.
It might be an extra jQuery plugin, but
JavaScript, but not through CSS. They can scale automatically.
no, but Bootstrap has jQury.
Yes.
And then
You can do it with CSS in standards browsers.
You could. I know that Bootstrap has in it, like on the image elements, it has max width 100%.
Correct.
So that you can never have an image that's going to poke out the side of a box that you put it into.
Oh, so if you want to do that kind of
Right? But
CSS
I think
trickery.
Background images, you might have to treat that specially. I don't know that that's going to automatically take care of that for you.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
But Kendall said it best. Play around with it. The
So Robert,
templates and defaults are great.
so from my standpoint, why are we looking at the good GitHub version if 3.0 has already got it wrapped in there?
So yeah, GitHub. GitHub has the best examples of how to take advantage of it, of all the features and functionality. So if we start looking at,
But if it's
and the
already-
documentation.
If it's already in 3.0, then
But if you want to know how,
change it in 3.0 then.
Well,
oh, you don't change it in 3.0. Really, you want to go to the GitHub site to understand how to take advantage of all the classes and all that.
If I can't apply it back to 3.0, I'm just missing connecting the
Well,
dots.
Oh, everything on the GitHub site is in 3.0
Okay.
So
on the Bootstrap side.
It's sort of like there's a base level of Bootstrap. The default Bootstrap's in Joomla, and it's there if you want it. But if you want to have your own custom template, you want to have your own custom implementation of Bootstrap, just build your own template just like normal. Install it into the 3.0, and in your template, call your Bootstrap files and instead of, you know, the ones that you compile through Robert's source, instead of Joomla's default bootstrap file, then you can get whatever effects you want. So it's like just using a different template, basically.
It's a bootstrap override, as a, you know, just think of it as a template.
We're already overriding. We're not even on 3.1 yet.
And so they don't conflict then if you have two going?
No, because if you don't...
You just don't call the core from the template. Yeah, the template's not going to use it unless you call it.
So if you don't call it the core, does the administrative backend take advantage of it?
Yes, different templates, an admin template.
Okay.
Again, so just the template's got that line calling the Bootstrap framework. And it's really good just going to the site for a ton of documentation. You know, if we looked at that, those base CSS examples, we can see, you know, how to implement the buttons. You know, there's different button sizes. You know, there's different states for buttons. There's some default image element things you can do. How to handle tables and forms, which is really great because it really makes life a lot easier.
Are there capabilities for embedded web fonts? Integrate that?
You can always just drop in an embedded web font. That's not a problem.
Just do it one-off.
Correct. You just override it in your template CSS. So if you want to embed a web font.
They're not distributing any font files.
No.
Sort of an ordering issue? Do you need to include the web font before you install it?
So the way we do our CSS is, you know, obviously now Bootstrap's going to be at the top of your template pretty much. So if you want to override stuff, drop your CSS after the Bootstrap include. So otherwise, that's going to rule, you know, the way CSS works.
Well, no, if I want to embed a web font, right, I'd have to do the embed first.
You do it after Bootstrap.
Before Bootstrap. Then Bootstrap can call what I've already done.
So I can answer.
Maybe I don't understand the question.
that. If you wanted to make the default text font for Bootstrap a web font, right? Like all headlines, I've done this, all headlines are going to use Google's Lato font, right? Then you need to include that font first, then Bootstrap, right? But if it's not a default heading or paragraph style, if you just got some other style that you wanted to call out, it can go after, because it's not actually part of the Bootstrap CSS.
Yeah, so if you have a special module that uses some kind of script font, you would just call it after. So again, just search for Twitter Bootstrap. Go there for tons of great examples. The components are great. So you know, we have drop downs that you can implement very easily. Things like navbar, some of the stuff that already kind of exists in the way that at least the Joomla backend works. So you can actually see that if we go over here. So these are all just regular Bootstrap buttons, Bootstrap menus, drop downs, things like that are taking advantage of the default. So there's really very little work in implementing them at this point. You know, you just create the structure for a nav bar or nav links, things like that, drop downs, and it's all sort of instantaneous without all the heavy lifting of building it yourself. And since this is also responsive, we can take a look at the admin acting responsively. So in this case, they actually hide out a lot of the functionality. There's the toolbar that's available, the nav bar. So these are actually just very standard navigation elements that come with Twitter Bootstrap. So that's sort of the quick and dirty view of Twitter Bootstrap and Joomla. Joomla 3.0 is very responsive now. It really depends on you taking advantage of building it out into your templates. If you're building it out with Bootstrap, you can have a very responsive website right out of the box. Twitter Bootstrap, is the new way of doing things on Joomla. So that's included and being incorporated into everything side, and we hope all the way on up to the extension developer side. Everyone, you can always override it, ignore it, not use it, but it's a nice way to get a lot of the heavy lifting out of the way, so you can concentrate on getting functionality and look and feel going. And then for Dennis, less CSS, because I know Dennis was dying to at least have it mentioned. And less is sort of the pre-compiler, however you want to call it, that just makes generating CSS, complex CSS, a lot easier. So start building your responsive Joomla templates and websites. Thank you.